Osasu Igbinedion.
Good morning to our viewers across the world. It's 8 a.m. here in Abuja, Nigeria's federal capital, and you're tuned in to the weekend show exclusively on Africa Independent Television. It's a program we bring you the best in lifestyle, sports, politics, and entertainment. As is tradition on the weekend show, first things first, we bring you the headlines of the week. Welcome back to the weekend show. Today we'll be discussing the reading culture in the 21st century. There are numerous reading strategies and comprehension techniques that are now available when addressing a 21st century reader, which were unavailable in the 19th century. Technology has successfully occupied every aspect of our lives. Over the past 15 years, there have been a decline in the time we invest in reading. Mobile phones and media players have invented, and more people are looking at their screens. E-readers, too, are a very new way to read books and other articles and information. But in today's program, we'll be talking about the positive and negative effects this has on everyday Nigerians. Today's segment focuses on how much the 21st century reading culture has been influenced.
You know, growing up, I remember reading so many books, the likes of Chicken and the River, As It Goes to School, The Gods Are Not to Blame. And you look at kids these days, how many Nigerian authors do we know about? We hear of the likes of Chimamanda and a few others, but what has happened between then and now, and how can we actually improve on that? And to discuss that with us in the studio, we have two gentlemen. First of all, we have Emeka Ozurumba, who is a graduate of English language, an author of 7 books, and also a poet. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much.
We also have with us Chukwuma Okoroafor. He is a lawyer, but I'm also aware that you've been involved in a project which involves renovating and equipping a library in Plateau State and also one in Abuja. He is a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Shapers Community, the Abuja Hub. Nice to have you on the show, Chukwuma.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, how would you assess our current reading culture in Nigeria? In the 21st century, would you say that we are reading more? Not maybe traditionally, because I hardly see, young people our age opening books and reading them now. I see everybody on their phones. How would you assess the reading culture in Nigeria now? I'll start with you.
Okay, I agree with you that the dynamics have changed. But I wouldn't like to say that the culture has been really different. I think the structure is just what has changed. And it just goes to say that the technological disruptions in our world have taken a toll on young people in our world today. So I would like to say that, yeah, there's the change, obviously. People find the hardcover books uninteresting. Some other people find them interesting. I personally find the hardcover books interesting because I like to mark, I like to, take notes and all of that. But it still doesn't change the fact that people are still reading. People are still reading because if you look at from the moment you wake up in the morning till the end of your day, the amount of information you have collated, either through the blogs, through Medium, through your phone, through just the news around town via technology, of course. You find that you really know so much that is happening, but the mode in which you acquired that knowledge is probably not the traditional way that everybody is used to. So your parents might never find you carrying a book and they'll just assume that, oh, you people never read. But when you interact with young people, you find that they actually know so much. And then the question now goes, how do they know these things? I mean, on Twitter alone, there's a lot of information on Twitter. There's so much people are conversing about, from social issues to politics to entertainment to lifestyle to even the weirdest of things, as far back as ancient history. The people that's what they're passionate about. So you tend to see that at the end of the day, I know so many things all of a sudden, but the mode in which it was communicated to me may not be conventional. I think that's where the conversation is really what is burning in this sort of conversation.
But Emeka, while I want to agree with you, especially both of you who are hardcover readers, I prefer soft copies. Maybe because I'm an IT person, because attention span has increasingly reduced over the years, and you mentioned Twitter, where you're limited to what, 280 characters,
yeah.
and so reading is now even compressed. Doesn't that, and Emeka, this goes to you, doesn't that actually affect the people? Does this mean writers need to write shorter books? Does this also affect assimilation and the knowledge we are gaining because it's now compressed?
Okay, no, we have in this modern day century a cultural obituary of reading because of the transmission of social equity in terms of what you're reading. It's now being transmitted to, let me say, different vices and social apparatuses. But if you want to go back to our reading, let me say, modems in Nigeria, we could talk about the first attempt of writing a novel by Amos Tutuola, the Palm One Drunkard. It was written by him. That was the first attempt at a novel. So we could see at a time in Nigeria where we had the Onitsha market renaissance, that was in the early 90s. We could also come to understand that there was a time where reading was passionate. Nigerians had this passion about reading. Nigerians had this enactment to want to better their society by reading better. But all of a sudden, there's been a loss of focus due to the paraplegia on politics, or let me say the miasma on, let me just say, political activities. It has really changed. So it's not more, let me say, the writer or the reader. It's the content and the context of what we're talking about. So it's not just what you have to compress or what you have to say. It's a matter of what is being said and how is it bettering the society and how does it conjugate to what we're trying to, you know,
so are you
put
saying
together.
that the general populace is more interested in politics
Yes.
and the distractions caused by politics?
Yes, yes.
That they find it difficult to pick up a book on
Yes.
social studies. They find
Yes.
it difficult to pick up a history book.
Yes.
I was having a conversation with someone recently, and they said that history was banned in schools, and I was appalled. I said, "How can we even shape our way forward if we don't understand our history, if we don't understand where we're coming from?"
Yes.
I was reading a book last year, Oil, Politics and Violence, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and I realized that the mistakes we were making back in 1960 are the same mistakes, governmental mistakes we're making now.
True.
So it's either our leaders are not readers,
Yeah.
and are just repeating the same,
Mistake cycle.
cyclic effects of, mistakes, or there's something fundamentally wrong with us. So I completely agree with you, but I would also like to ask, the advent of social media, you said that technology has helped us, digest information, consume information better, but what is the quality of information we are consuming? You don't necessarily have to be a reader to be on social media. A lot of people just post pictures and videos of themselves, and people can be on social media for 8 hours straight, and you're just consuming that. It's not necessarily you reading, you're just watching a video, or you're just looking at pictures, double clicking. So what is the quality of information that we're taking in because of social media? Emeka?
Yes, I think we're taking in a lot of wrong material at the moment, because when you find out, if you're trying to read a book, a hardcover book, there'll be lack of distractions. But when you're on social media and you're trying to read, there's so many distractions, and you're not reading per se, you're just like communicating. But if you want to read and you want to read, you have to confine yourself to the confines of where reading can really be intellectual, where you can actually sit down and understand what you're reading. So social media has its goods and its bads on its influences in reading. So we have to get that right and get the boundary and distinction between what we're reading and the medium we're using to read. For example, there's some things you could use the social media to read, like you can't really conventionally see. And okay, this brings me to another topic, which I just think I have to put. You see, having e-libraries are a very good option of reading, you understand? But the level of dilapidation in Nigeria doesn't make us have access to e-libraries. So if we had e-libraries, we would have had access to a place where we could say we're going for reading in kind of like an electronic medium, where you could say, okay, you have access to materials. But when you're just reading, like, let me just say on your phone, or you're just trying to just get some materials, you will not really read, and you'll not put cognizance what you actually have put if you were reading conventionally. So I think there has been like a mixed opinion in this bias.
Okay, so let's circle back a little bit beyond the politics, beyond the adults. the reading culture at the primary level is reasonably okay. Not talking about the content, the culture, and that's because a lot of the focus is on English and mathematics, and so you now have to read. I feel there's a disconnect once you get into secondary school, and then there are now subjects which you have to study and pass to get to the next grade, and so literature stops at GS3, and so let's say an art student, and so it's now pushed to the side, and it becomes okay for you to be great at physics and chemistry and not know English more than the basic level. Do you feel the curriculum at the secondary school stage has affected the reading culture with adults?
I agree with you that the reading culture, when you progress in our educational system, changes. And I think largely it accounts for the half-baked knowledge that is being shared around. So you hear people converse, and they don't really have a depth. You know, they just talk based on probably what they've seen of social media, and, you know, and when you really get into detail, you know, there are a lot of so reading is not just an English business. For you to even be a mathematician, you must read. For you to be a lawyer, you must read. For you to be a doctor, you must be able. So it's a culture that spans across different sectors. So you can't take it out and fragment it. You know, this kind of thing. So I would like to say that it's important that the communication in our education system should be such that you have to read. You should read. It's important to read, because when you are well grounded in reading, or when you have a reading culture, it enables you have the ability to interpret things even better. You are more critical in your thinking, in your analysis, and you're not just someone that has a half-baked understanding of subjects.
Just the surface level. And you see, there are people listening to you right now and saying, well, they're, you know, leaders of most of the powerful nations in the world, and they're not readers. Donald Trump, for example.
President
Muhammad Buhari, you know. So they're like, these people have reached the, you know, highest level of power, and they're not big readers. So why should I read? You know, there are people asking that question right now. What's your response to that?
So you see, such people, they will appeal to a certain crowd of, a certain class of people. But when you flip them in another situation, they might really not appeal to anybody. And when you talk about the total man, like there's a phenomenal saying that if you want to hide anything from a Nigerian, put it in a book. In any format, because it just tells you the level in which, you know, people are so disconnected from the culture of reading. Yes, you might be nice, you might be wealthy, you might be rich, you might be a top shot banker, but there's still a limitation. There's a place you will get to, and this inadequacy will be very evident, and it will really make you feel some type of way. So I believe that even in our decisions, even in our selection processes of people, these are things that you should take into cognizance. How does Mr. A analyze issues? What are his thoughts? Does he have a far wide understanding of subjects? And now I'm not just talking about isolated knowledge. I get fascinated when people come and meet me about things that are not even related to their field. Like a doctor telling me about medieval history, about Karl Marx, about, you know, the wars that happened in time past. I'll be more interested in that sort of person than somebody else that just comes and has a straightway knowledge about a story, because at that point in time you can't really analyze things. And for instance, that's the issue with the education system, going back to what Andy was talking about in Nigeria. If you pick a Nigerian graduate and you pick a graduate from outside the country, they are both intelligent, but one thing you will significantly get is that the analytical skills of both of them is entirely different. And that's because in this part of the world, it's more of garbage in, garbage out. Nobody really has an all-rounded understanding of, so it's the same subject. But if we put it in another scenario, the person from this part of the world is probably going to be grappling. But in America, for instance, or in other jurisdictions, you know, you find out that reading it's fun. It's made fun. It's made interesting, and you must read. I remember telling people how I did a dissertation at undergrad level, and they were like, "Oh, you've gotten to PhD status in Nigeria," and that's because the format in which, you know, thesis or final year projects are done in this part of the world is it's different. You understand what I'm talking about? So there's a level you will get to with not knowing, you know, that will become very obvious
for an intellectual person to see. I, for one, I would pick somebody who is intellectual over somebody who is just, you know, straight bound in his knowledge. That's just the way I'll deal.
Emeka, you know how he said about if you want to hide something from a Nigerian or a black man, put it in a book. It's interesting because even if you look at stuff like our budgets, how many Nigerians actually look at or know about our budgets? So organizations like Budget had to make them into infographics for us to actually pay attention to something that actually matters to us. Now, as a writer in this age, what do you think should be done better, and also to encourage local writers?
Okay, let me bring out a thesis from one of my book, The Tail Crest, where I was actually talking about a woman who was suffering from bovine spongiform encephalopathy. It's called the mad cow disease. So in her mind, she was the wife of a president. So she was making some speeches in a confinement, in like an asylum. Like, my husband won through wrong electoral processes. I know you rigged the elections and won. I can see our whole conurbation is in distress. I can see our society is in dilapidation, but I'm with you all the way. I'm following you. I'm going to be with you. Yes, you won through illegalities, but yes, I'm with you. It comes down to that. It comes down to our infrastructural development. It comes down to our basic needs of our children, the progeny, the future to come. If we don't make good arrangements for them, if we don't put them in a level where they're going to supersede their peers, we're just going to be wasting our time, because reading is not a thing you can do when you're subjected to poverty and hunger. Reading is not a thing you can do when you're subjected to a lot of differences than your peers in other climes. You know, so we have to make sure we make the basic infrastructure for our children ready, so that reading will not just be a thing to them like, okay, what do we have to read for? The people that are even there, do they read? What do they even program to us to read? So it's a matter of both, it's a synergy both between the writer and the reader. So we have to come to assesses where we have to understand, okay, what are we giving our children? This writing, what are writers? Like we that write, we don't just write for just the basis of writing. We write to enlighten the society. We write to make people understand what the society means. So as a writer, it hardens me sometimes to see my society in dilapidation. It does, because I just look at it that when people don't even have access to 3 square meals, when people don't have access to good things, how are they going to focus on intellectual things? How are they going to focus on reading? How are they going to focus on things that are going to be...
But isn't that why they should focus on those things? To improve themselves, then by and large improve the society. So I feel like there's an excuse for every chore you don't want to carry out, right? Yes. So we can blame society for not, you know, creating a conducive environment for people to read more. Yeah. But the reality is that there is no better investment than self-investment. Yes. So what you put in will be what you become. So if you want to prosper, if you want to be able to afford 3 square meals, if you want to have a successful career, you have to read. But very lastly, because we ran out of time, what's your advice to the millennial generation, our young people, social media, techies? You know, what's your advice to our generation who are watching this program right now and said, okay, I want to improve my reading skills, but I'm a little bit obsessed with Real Housewives of Atlanta. I'm a little bit obsessed with Big Brother of Nigeria, you know, to pick up a book and read. So instead of investing, you know, 2 hours reading a book, they would rather watch these reality TV shows. What's your advice to them?
There should also be technical mediums for us to align our generations. Like this new generation has to do with different media prospectus, so we have to incline ourselves to those media prospectus. Like if you want to read, you could use e-readings, you could get text, you could still use the normal mediums, you could still use your laptops and all that, but you should just get the right material and get the right context. That will help you better in being a better reader and writer in the future, probably.
Awesome.
I think my advice will be that we should be a bit more intentional about reading. Because I wouldn't like to say that it's for the lack of availability of materials to read, but it's more of a culture. So if I want to know anything, there are free e-learning platforms. There's the National Library. I remember saying that we have a National Library. Somebody was asking where. And you go there and you see newspapers from even the 1980s, all stacked there. So I think that we should be a bit more, and people should be encouraged, you know, to read. You know, whenever you meet people, find a way, like through the Global Shapers community, we've been able to launch at least 2, partner with some people to revamp libraries. One is currently going on in Jos today, and the other one is in partnership with a group called Susty Vibes here in Abuja, in the early years school, somewhere in Dangama community. So the whole essence is that we that have this information and know this, we should also encourage people to read. So for instance, if you come to me with any problem, I would ask you, what is your own thought on it? You know, because before people come to you with asking questions, they should be able to know that there's a Google. Have you checked Google? Have you what effort have you put in to this subject you want to know about? So we should be a bit more intentional, and it's across all levels, in government, in the schools, in policy, you know, and as thought leaders in whatever fields we find ourselves.
That's a fine place to leave it.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you so much
Thank
for
you
your
so
time.
much.
Thank you so much,
And,
Osasu, for having us.
Thank you. We'll take a short break right now. When we return, we'll bring you the social media trends on the weekend show. Don't go anywhere.